Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Mother's Day. Whether you are here in the sanctuary with us or you're watching from online at home, it's good for all of us to be together. As we prepare for worship this morning to explore next month's SoulMatters theme of renewal, I offer these words by the Reverend Scott Taylor. May they help ground us and center our minds and our hearts for worship. Mindful of the precious promise of a new day, we gather again to recommit ourselves to the task of mending, of tying together those tender strands that connect us to each other, the world, and those parts of ourselves buried deep. Within this work of renewal, hope lies in wait. So come, friends, let us begin and let us worship together. And just a quick note before we continue that we are continuing to have technical difficulties. We have some lights out. We've got a projector screen that's refusing to turn off or to show any slides. So just bear with us today and we will be able to still have a wonderful morning together.
The flaming chalice is the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. Will those of you here in person please stand in body or spirit for our chalice lighting? And if you have a chalice at home, I invite you to light it at this time. As Sasha said, we don't have the words on the screen that we usually say, but now's your opportunity to test your memory. And so if you remember, please join me in saying our chalice lighting words. As we kindle this flame, we recommit ourselves to nurturing the spirits of one another and the common good of the world we share. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home. For those of you already standing, I invite you to remain standing for our opening hymn. You'll need to crack open those gray hymnals for this one. Our opening hymn this morning is number 38, Morning Has Broken. That's hymn number 38.
Praise for the Savior.
Good morning. My name is Becky Elliott, and I'm happy to be part of the worship team this morning. Whether you are a first-time visitor or a long-time member, I offer you a special welcome this morning. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively serving the common good of our shared world. Whoever you are, and wherever you are on your own religious journey, you are welcome here. If you are visiting us for the first time in person, I invite you to stop by our welcome stand in the foyer. If you haven't already done so, fill out one of our visitor forms, get a name tag, and pick up one of our pamphlets to find out about UUFR and Unitarian Universalism. If you are visiting online, I invite you to fill out our visitor form at uufr.org/visitor form, and if you do this, you'll start receiving our weekly e-newsletter. This morning, Eleanor Goodwin, one of our lay ministers, will be available in the front right corner of the sanctuary, right over here, after the service to talk with anyone who might be experiencing any difficult circumstances in their lives and would just like to talk with someone. I hope all of you will read through the chalice that you received by email on Thursday or maybe Friday about everything happening here around UUFR. Our in-person social hour this morning is downstairs in Founders Hall. I now invite you to meet and greet your neighbor.
There will be plenty of time to continue the conversations after social hour. This is the time in our service when we acknowledge some of the joys and the sorrows of our community. And we do this because we believe that a joy shared is a joy made greater, and a sorrow shared is made easier to bear. Anyone is invited to email a joy or sorrow to joysandsorrows@uufr.org before 9 a.m. on Sunday. And anyone is also invited to light a candle before the service if you wish, and to fill out one of our cards so that your joy or sorrow can be shared with the congregation. This morning we lit a candle for all of the mothers among us and for everyone who is remembering their mothers today. Whether you are someone who finds Mother's Day joyful, or whether Mother's Day is sometimes a difficult day for you, we hold you in our hearts this morning. This morning we also have a sorrow to share. Janine Berger shares the sad news that her father, August Berger, died last month. May we hold Janine and her family in our hearts during this time of grief. And as we hold these shared joys and sorrows in our hearts, and we reflect on all of those joys, sorrows, fears, and hopes of our own lives, Let's be together for a time now of stillness and silence, opening ourselves up to that spirit within us and amidst us, called by many names, but known to every human heart, that leads to a deeper, richer, fuller experience of life. And after the silence, we will sing hymn number 1009 in your blue hymnal, Meditation on Breathing. But for now, let's go ahead and just be together in stillness and silence. And again, that's hymn number 1009 in your blue hymnal, Meditation on Breathing, 1009.
Everything we do here at UUFR is only possible because of the generous financial support so many of us provide. If you would like to make a contribution this morning, we invite you to bring it forward and put in one of the offering plates at the head of the aisles. If you would prefer to have an usher come to you, please raise your hand. Usually, there are a couple other ways that you can give that are on the screen, but you can give online or you can mail something into the church. So check out the website for that. Our offering will now be given and gratefully received. Our reflection this morning is by the Reverend Jan Richardson, an artist, writer, and ordained minister in the United Methodist Church. The reading we share today is called Blessing of the Well from her book, Circle of Grace. If you stand at the edge of this blessing and call down into it, you will hear your words return to you. If you lean in and listen close, you will hear this blessing give the story of your life back to you. Quiet your voice. Quiet your judgment. Quiet the way you always tell your story to yourself. Quiet all these, and you will hear the whole of it and the hollows of it, the spaces in the telling, the gaps where you hesitate to go. Sit at the rim of this blessing. Press your ear to its lips, its sides, its curves that were carved out long ago by those whose thirst drove them deep, those who dug into the layers with only their hands and hope. Rest yourself beside this blessing, and you will begin to hear the sound of water entering the gaps. Still yourself, and you will feel it rising up within you, filling every emptiness, springing forth anew.
Thank you, Pickup Choir, for your music today. Most of you know that I will be starting a new ministry in Morristown, New Jersey in about 2.5 months. And as you might imagine, the to-do list between now and then is quite long. And one of the things on that list is to visit Morristown for a couple of days here soon to look for a place to live. Smokey and I may meet with a realtor when we're there. And when I think of realtors, I'm reminded of a poem by Maggie Smith called Good Bones. In it, the author talks about trying to sell the world to her children like a realtor sells a house. She talks about the beauty and the brokenness of the world and how she tries to nurture in her children a love for this world and a desire to make it a better place. Comparing the world to a fixer-upper, a house with some solid foundations, awaiting a special touch to unveil its inner beauty, she ends the poem by saying, "Any decent realtor chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful." And to be sure, sometimes we have no trouble at all seeing the beauty of life and of our own lives. There are plenty of days when we wake up in the morning feeling renewed in spirit and body, refreshed and optimistic. We greet a day seemingly full of unlimited possibility, and we enter with eagerness and energy into a world that, even with all of its imperfections, holds the promise in it of something wholly new and beautiful in store for us. We may experience each and every blessing that day has in store for us with fresh eyes, like a little child discovering the delights of the world for the very first time. And we may end the day with a feeling of gratitude for all of the wonders that we have experienced that day. And on those days, we don't need a life realtor to chirp in and tell us all about life's good bones and to help us see the ways that life and our own lives can be made new. Because on those days, we are the realtor. We are aware of the rich possibilities for beauty and goodness all around us, and we have the energy to bring them to fruition. But life has its ups and its downs, and sometimes our lives in the world feel in need of a little sprucing up. Maybe just a little spring cleaning, and sometimes, though, perhaps a whole renovation. Maybe you're feeling overworked, like your job or your schoolwork or your family situation. The troubles of parenting are just taking over far too much of your life right now. Maybe you long for more space in your life for what you truly love, or space to just breathe and be with yourself and your thoughts. That's one type of renewal that we might long for. Or maybe you are coping with too many stressful situations in your daily life, like financial struggles, family crises, or strained relationships. Maybe you long for peace and rest or healing. And that's another type of renewal that we might long for. Maybe you're dissatisfied with the way that you're living your life right now. Maybe you long for a new and renewed alignment between the things that you value most in life and the things that you actually prioritize in your day-to-day life. Maybe you're discouraged about what it is that you hear about in the news every day, or your own knowledge of the many troubles that afflict the world and those you love. Maybe you long for a new world full of justice and compassion. Or maybe despair has become your constant companion, and you find it hard to imagine a better future than the one you know now. Maybe you long for renewed hope. So there are so many different kinds of ways that we can feel dissatisfied with our lives and long for something new and something different. And in those times, how do we find renewal, the renewal that we long so much for? So let me tell you a little story that may help. My sister Malia and her boyfriend Jake enjoy renovating homes. And a few years ago, they moved here to North Carolina, and they purchased a house that, let's just say, was a bit of a fixer-upper. And when I first visited this house shortly after she and her family moved in, I could see that their house needed a lot of work. But though my sister is not a realtor, she sounded a bit like one as she took me on a tour. And this is going to be a totally new bathroom when we're done working on it, she said as I stared in dismay at a bathtub that looked like it was 1 second away from crashing through the floor and into the dining room below. And down this way, she said, leading me down a hallway with uneven flooring, we're going to tear all of this up and replace it with this wood here. And I nodded doubtfully as she patted the pile of hardwood that I had nearly tripped over a moment before. Now, my sister is an interior designer by training, and she saw in that fixer-upper a house with totally different eyes than I possess. She and her partner Jake had the ability to imagine what the house could become and the knowledge to bring their ideas to life. And a few years later, that house is still a work in progress in many ways, but so many elements that were only dreams a few years ago are realities now. It really is a whole new house. And now when she points to, say, a crooked cabinet and a pile of granite and tells me about the new counters she's going to be installing in the kitchen, I have a much easier time believing in her vision. So when times are hard, in the many different ways that our lives can be hard sometimes, it can help to think of life like a renovator thinks of a home. You know, we can look for the beauty that's already there around us and the possibilities there for yet more beauty. We can nurture the beauty that is already there and then one step at a time bring the possibilities for more beauty to life. And the changes may be gradual, but little by little, those changes can also be incredibly profound. It's like a story that's sometimes known as the magic vase. There are a whole bunch of different versions of this, and it kind of goes this way. So once upon a time, there was a family with a mother, a father, and a daughter. The family loved each other dearly, and they enjoyed many years of happiness together, but as families sometimes do, they eventually fell on hard times. The mother grew ill, and soon she had to leave her job, and she ended up having to stay in bed for many long days as she worked really hard to regain her strength. The father became the sole breadwinner for the family, and he had to take on a second job to make ends meet, and then a third job. He worked long, hard days and weekends, but still, it was barely enough to make the family's ends meet. The daughter tried to help keep up with the housework, but it was way too much for a little girl to do alone, and she needed to focus on her schoolwork and to help care for her sick mom. And soon, the family was forced to move to a smaller house that they could afford and that they had the time and energy to manage. And when they moved into their new home, they were dismayed by what it was they found. Grass and weeds filled the backyard, which was absolutely tiny. Dirt covered the windows and the paint peeled off of the walls. It wasn't anything like their beautiful old house. And the family sighed sadly as they moved in and they resigned themselves to their fate. Until one weekend, the daughter of the family went around the neighborhood, heading to the park to go play on the swings. And as she walked, she spotted a sign. Yard sale, it said, and a big red arrow pointed toward a side street. Now, the little girl didn't have much money, but luckily yard sales don't cost much money, and she had a little bit of leftover allowance. And so she peeked at the coins in her pocket, and then she smiled and she went to that yard sale. And there, spread out on blankets and tables, were all kinds of interesting things that had been sort of pre-curated. There were candles and picture frames, Tupperware and mugs, clothing and books. And then her eyes fell on it. There, atop a card table that had been piled with fun costume jewelry and ceramic drink coasters, sat a beautiful vase. Well, it wasn't long before she handed a little of her allowance over to the lady running the yard sale, and the lady smiled as she accepted the coins. "Make sure you take good care of that," she told the little girl with a wink. "It's a magic vase." And the little girl pondered those words all the way back to her home. A magic vase? What did the lady mean by that, a magic vase? And when she got home, her father was just returning from work. And when he saw the vase, he smiled and he took it from her. "My, that's pretty, isn't it?" Let's give it a nice place over here. And he placed the vase in front of the window. And the little girl looked at the window, humming quietly and thought. The sunset was beginning to gleam faintly through the dirty glass, and she knew that the vase would look beautiful against its backdrop if she could just clean away the dirt. She hurried into the kitchen for a couple of rags, and she set about wiping down that window. There, she said a few minutes later, smiling, the vase looked perfect against the beautiful colors of the sunset. And the next morning, before work, her father stood in the kitchen, rubbing his chin, looking at that window and that vase. The paint in this kitchen is a really nice color, he thought. It goes great with this vase, but it needs a fresh coat or two of paint. I'll make that my project next weekend. And that day after work, he returned with some fresh cans of paint. And a week later, the walls were painted a cheery yellow. One afternoon, the little girl found herself staring out the window at the overgrown backyard. She remembered the garden her family had at their old house with its daffodils and its vegetables. At first, she'd missed it. But now, through the clean glass, she noticed something. Maybe it was the yellow color of the paint on the wall around the window that helped her see more clearly. But there, framed in the glass, was an abundance of little yellow flowers. They had just started blooming in all of the weeds. As she peeked out the window, she saw butterflies and bees flying around. "We still have a garden," she murmured, smiling. A beautiful spring garden. And she went outside and she gathered a bouquet of all those wild flowers, and then she brought them inside to her mother, who sat resting in the armchair. "Look, Mom," she said, as her mother blinked in surprise at the fistful of yellow blossoms. "These are from our garden." "So they are," her mother said, and kissed her daughter on the forehead. "Let's put them in the window." And so the little girl put the flowers in the magic vase and smiled. Her new home was beautiful. Sometimes when times are hard, it can be tempting to think that massive change is necessary if we are ever going to find renewal. We may think everything must be totally made new if I'm going to feel renewed. My financial hardships must resolve, and I must return to financial stability, and then I can finally feel renewed. This illness must pass, and I must fully recover my strength, and then I will feel restored. I need to escape this job right now and find one more fulfilling, and then I'll be able to embrace what I truly love. We need a total system overhaul, and then we will begin to see justice take root in our society. But sometimes it is the simple things that we find in the midst of our messy lives and our world that renew us the most and offer the power to bring renewal to the wider world. As I was discussing today's sermon with my partner Smokey, he shared a quote with me that I think is valuable for us today. It's from a book by C.S. Lewis called The Screwtape Letters. And in the story, there are these two demons, a senior demon and a junior demon, who are discussing best practices for tempting human souls away from God. And referring to humans as patients, the senior demon tells his junior tempter, "I would eradicate from my patient any strong personal taste, even something as trivial as a fondness for country cricket or collecting stamps or drinking cocoa. The man who truly enjoys anything for its own sake, without caring what other people say, is forearmed against our subtlest modes of attack. You should always try to make the patient abandon the people or food or books he really likes in favor of the best people, the right food, the important books. I have known a human defended from strong temptations to social ambition by a still stronger taste for tripe and onions. So there are a great many things that distract us from the things in our lives that are the most worth prioritizing. Many of those distractions, like the pursuit of success, the lure of material things that we don't need, the unrelenting drive toward productivity, those kinds of things can be soul draining. They demand our constant energy, our attention, our personal resources, and they cut us off from some of the sources of renewal that are important to us, like life's simplest pleasures, our most genuine loves, and our most cherished values. Those are the good bones in our lives that can be the foundation and the fuel for the renewal that we seek. Sure, sometimes renewal comes about in these big, massive changes, whether we're talking about a big move to a new place where a fresh start awaits, or even a new law that ushers in a new reality, a vitally needed new political reality for our society. And these kinds of big changes to life as we know it can be powerful and valuable. But these kinds of sudden, explosive changes are infrequent in our world, in our lives, and thankfully they are not the only ways that we or our world can be made new. Within our daily lives and in our wider world, there are tiny sparks all around us that can, if nurtured, fuel us for the work ahead and light our path with inspiration as we navigate our way toward the restoration that we seek. Some of these sparks are like relationships that we prioritize and we work on so that one day that relationship can be even stronger and healthier, a greater source of strength for us. Some of those sparks look like a soul-nourishing passion that we make room for in our lives so that we will feel inspired and alive. Some of those sparks look like moments of quiet reflection that give us some space to breathe and room to grow. Some of those sparks look like a justice-making organization that we support so that one day we will live in a more compassionate and sustainable world. Some of those sparks look like a cherished value that we center daily in our lives, centering all of our choices around that value so that it can infuse our whole lives with that which matters most to us. Some of the sparks look like a bit of beauty that we notice and protect so that it can flourish and so that others can enjoy it for generations to come. There are so many things that can spark unimagined transformation when we attend to them with care, like the magic vase in a worn-down home. My friends, may we each discover the good bones of our lives, those simple, genuine loves and values that anchor us. May we nurture and protect them, making them the foundation upon which we build and the fuel that moves us toward the renewal that we long for. And may we, day by day, discovery by discovery, act by act, create something truly beautiful and wholly new. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so. And now let's go ahead and rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn. It's number 126 in your gray hymnal, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Again, 126. Please be seated. It is time now for us to bring our time of worship to a close, but as we extinguish this chalice flame, its light will continue to burn in our hearts. As we go out into our daily lives, I leave you with the words of the Reverend Sarah York. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. Amen. Blessed be, and go in peace.